Power Crew. My name is Bree, and welcome back to figure out what it is I'm reading. Also, we have a special guest. This is Ballpark. He is the adorable little dachshund. So he'll be here, probably leave some other time. Anyway, we have a lot to talk about, and by a lot, I mean not that much. But first things first, I did not make a wrap-up video for October because October was a crazy busy month for me. I went on vacation with my boyfriend. We went to Salem, Massachusetts, had so much fun. And then my mom got sick, so she was in and out of the hospital. So it was just kind of a crazy mashup of stuff that happened. So unfortunately, I didn't get to do a wrap-up. We will do a wrap-up of October and November this month, just to encapsulate it all. I did read in October, but I didn't get to talk about it. If you hear any noises on the side, it's the cats and the dog. They wanted to be with me today. Also, my hair is very weird and not exactly attractive at the moment, but that's okay because I don't know what I'm doing with it yet. And when I get bored, I'll re-dye it a random color. I like to change it, but I like to let it breathe for a moment before I throw bleach and color on it. So we'll see about that. For now, this is what we're working with. I'm embracing it. I go to work like this. It is what it is. It's just hair. But let's jump right on in and talk with October 1st. I have my notes because it's been quite a while since I actually read them now. I've been almost 2 months now. So the first book I read in October was Tender is the Flesh by Augustina BrizeeReads. Sorry if I got it wrong. I gave this book 4 stars. I really did like it. It was translated from a different language, so there might be some weird things. Like they refer to the main character as he most of the time. That's Ween. And I don't know if that's just translation or if they just wanted him to be referred to as he. His name is Marcos, but we don't really hear his name Marcos very often. We just refer to him as he. So it makes it kind of difficult to understand who they're talking about, especially when there's more than 2 people in the scene at that time. But we follow our main character, Marcos, who is a slaughterhouse worker, but this time the meat population has been contaminated by some type of virus, parasite, they don't really say much about it, that has spoiled all the meat. Humans can no longer eat it. Ballpark. Calm it down. So instead they have to eat human flesh. So they prepare it the same way that you would any other type of meat, pigs, cattle, sheep, anything like that. So it goes very graphically into just the production of meat and how you treat it. So it makes you really think about it and how just blatant they are when they discuss it, when they're going through the slaughterhouses. They're just so like, it's fine. This is what we do. We hit him in the head. We shock him with this gun. You know, it is what it is. And then we tear them apart and you go and eat them. And they're raised very much like cattle, so they can't speak. They don't know how to write or interact. They're very much animalistic, the people that they breed for the slaughterhouses. And it is disturbing on some levels to read about. There was a scene with some dogs that was very traumatic to read, and I did not enjoy that scene whatsoever. But overall, I thought it was a really good read. The main character runs into a problem when he's gifted a cattle. He's gifted a female that he can sell, kill, eat, do whatever he wants, and he runs into some trouble with that. So he has to navigate his life with this. It's a very good story about grief and how we deal with it. No, thank you. And just overall, it was a very It was a quick read, but it was a very good read. The second book that I read was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And I wanted to read this one for a while because it's a classic. Everybody knows it. And I know that it would be very different than the book. Not the book. Than the movie. Not movie. Show, movie, whatever. I knew that it would be very different. I didn't know how different. It's very different. And controversial opinion, I did not like this. I gave it 2 stars, and I had to push through to read. Not because I expected it to be exactly like the show, and I expected it to have that same not because I expected to have the same creep factor or the same shock value, but I felt like there was not much happening. It's a classic haunted house story. This doctor basically wants to discover Hill House. He wants to awaken Hill House, and he wants to gather people around him that have had paranormal experiences in some level in their life. So he gathers them around, and they all go to Hill House to prove that it's haunted. He wants scientific data for this, and he thinks that sensitive people to the paranormal will awaken it. And it does, and some creepy stuff happens, and it's interesting, but I felt like things didn't start happening until I was 80% done with the book. The last 20% of the book was a roller coaster of haunting and interesting, but it was a very slow burn up till then. Very slow burn, and I didn't expect it to be quite as slow. And I know thousands of people love it. It's a classic for a reason. It's, you know, it started the Haunted House series. It was a great telling of it. People embrace it and they love it, and that's great, and I totally respect that. I just was not one of those people, unfortunately. The third book I read was The Co-Worker by Frida McFadden, and I loved this book. It was a 4-star for me, and I absolutely adore Frida McFadden. I love everything that she writes because I can never tell the ending. I think I know where it's going, and then it completely turns it on its head, and I'm like, oh, didn't see that coming. And those are the type of thrillers that I look for, the ones that are not predictable, the ones you think are predictable, but then they just yank the rug out from right underneath you and you're left stunned. So we follow our main character who has this odd co-worker. She just kind of she never does anything unpredictable. She's always at her desk at the right time. She's always eats lunch at this time. She always goes home at this time. She's very quirky in a way. She loves turtles, and she kind of gets on everybody's nerves a little bit. She's just odd, and she wants to be nice, and everybody loves her in that regard. Everybody's nice to her, kind of. And one day she doesn't show up to work. And so our main character, Natalie, goes out to find out why. She's a little thrown off by it. She's like, she's always here. She, you know, it's never like this. So she gets a weird phone call, and she could swear it's her coworker asking for help. So she goes on this cascade of like a mystery, trying to figure out where her coworker is. She knows something bad's happened to her. She knows she has to help her. She's begging for help. She sees all these signs, weird things keep popping up around her, and she ends up being the #1 suspect in her missing persons case. And they think she's been murdered, and they're pinning it all on her, and there's just a lot of twists and turns in this, and I don't want to give too much away because it actually is a really, really weird twist that I didn't see coming. So it's definitely worth a read. If you like thriller and mysteries, this definitely pick it up. I will be reading more Frida McFadden because I absolutely love everything that she's written so far. Big fan. The 4th book that I read was episode 13 by Craig D. Louis, and I picked this up because everybody was talking about it. I saw it on BookTube, I saw it on TikTok. I saw it all over my groups that I'm with. Everybody was like, oh my god, it's so good, it's so good, it's so good. It's, you know, a great haunted house story. And I love me some haunted houses, so I had to figure it out. So I picked it up from the library. Luckily they had it. So I was able to read it, and I gave this one, what did I give it? 3 stars. And here's the fun thing. I liked it until I didn't. I thought it was a very good read in a way. It was very classic. This paranormal film crew goes looking for a big finale for their first season, and hopefully to draw it out into season 2. They want to get more of an audience. They need a big bang. Their film directors, the film production agency has basically said, you're kind of lacking. Either pick it up or you're done. And this guy, it's his life work to be a paranormal investigator. His wife is a complete skeptic, doesn't believe in the paranormal, thinks it's all fake. It's all just, there can be, everything can be explained. Every sound, every noise, every, you know, bump in the night, it can be explained by something. So that was the hint of their show. It was to prove paranormal through a skeptic's lens. So if she can't debunk it, it had to be true. So they get this gigantic opportunity to go to one of the most notorious haunted places ever, and they take their whole crew there. And it's this asylum that they did experiments for, and I wish we had learned more about the doctors and the type of experiments that they did, because we didn't learn so much about that. We got to see some of the hauntings, and that was kind of fun. And then they end up like in a complete basement dungeon well where they would do all these medical experiments to these people, and that's when the story really kicks into high gear. And I loved that, but we didn't learn any of the backstory. And sometimes stories don't need any of the backstories. Sometimes they're great just on their own, but I really felt like this one needed some type of backstory. Just some, you were in a medical facility and we didn't really get anything medically. Like, I don't know why they were doing these experiments. I kind of do, I kind of don't. I felt like it wasn't explained. I felt like they focused much more on the aftermath without giving you the backstory. And I feel like you definitely you need some backstory in, I think, any type of haunted house, because you need to know why it's haunted. You need to know, is it the land? Is it the house? Was it the people? Was there a cult? Was it this? Was it that? So I feel like it was completely missing that. So I liked it. I thought it was a really good haunted house story. I thought it was well written, but I felt like I was missing something, like missing the heart of the story, if it were. So, you know, on the fence with this one. I did like it. I do have a few more books on my TBR by him, so hopefully, you know, it's not a consistent feeling of emptiness that I get from it. Like, we're almost there, not quite. We'll see. The 5th book I read, my bookmark's still in it, was The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix, and I gave this one 5 stars. I adored everything about this. If you don't know, The Final Girl is a horror trope. Horror movies, horror books. The Final Girl, it's been a trope for years. Pretty much, if there's a girl in a horror movie, she'll be the last one to survive. She's suffered, she's killed all the other people. She's usually the quiet, quirky one that nobody really wanted to be there in the first place, but then ends up overcoming everything and taking out the slasher, the killer, the demon, whatever it is, and becomes the final girl. And this book kind of takes the trope and runs with it. It combines, so you follow the final girls of a bunch of different classic slashers that they've named other things. The Texas Chainsaw Massacres in here, Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street. there's quite a bit in here, and that's the part that I loved, that it took those stories and those final girls and put a whole new spin on it, and I thought it was hilarious, and I loved every second of it. It's a true slasher book, this one, and I gotta tell you, I didn't see the ending coming, which was really funny too, because at halfway through I was like, there's no way that girl's involved, there's no way, 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 and then I was like, oh, never mind. Well, I've been proven wrong. And so you follow this final girl support group who is being taken out one by one, and they've figured out that this murderer is probably a fan of final girls and is like a freak, you know, fanboy or fangirl or whatever it is of final girls, and idolizes the killers, and has decided to take the final girls out one by one in getting their own 15 minutes of fame and becoming the notorious killer of the final girls. And it's such a ride from the start, and I loved every minute of reading this. I read it in like 2 days. It was brilliant. It was so fun. This is my second Grady Hendrix book, and I read Horror Store by him, and that was amazing and fun, and I loved every second of it. So I'm super excited to have another book of his on my TBR for my horror bingo, is another one of his books. I'm super excited to read more from him. And the last book that I read for October was a horror bingo TBR list. It was Mr. Lullaby by, where are you on my thing? Jim Markert. And it's on the horror bingo for multiple POVs, and hard mode was multiple timelines. And I listened to this one on audiobook on Spotify, and it just fit the genre perfectly. It wasn't even one that I had thought to put up there, but it was so much fun. And so you follow this main character. You follow a lot of main characters actually, because there's multiple POV, and the town is being terrorized by these sleep demons, kind of. So there's two worlds. Mr. Lullaby is so hard to explain. I don't even know where to begin with it. There's these coma patients, and when you're in a coma, you get to go to a different world that's kind of like laced on top of the real world. And they call it La La Land. And in La La Land, you get to meet all, wherever you dream, it comes true. So if somebody dreams it, it ends up in La La Land. And nightmares also end up in La La Land. So the nightmares are trying to come through. There is a killer head demon nightmare. His name is Mr. Lullaby, and he wants to come into the real world and turn it into his world. And we follow main character, a boy and a girl. He just came back from the army, and we follow his realization. His brother's been in a coma. He's been trying to deal with that. He's coming back to the world from the army. He can't cope. His town doesn't really like him. It's a very complicated story. I feel like it probably wouldn't have been this complicated had I not listened to it on audiobook. Maybe if I actually had the book in front of me and I was able to kind of flip back and forth to find it. I did enjoy that the audiobook had two different voice actors in it. So I don't know if voice actors is the right word, readers, maybe? I don't know. That they were able to do, there was a male and a female, so if you were in a female point of view, like Beth, it would be her voice, and if it was a male, like, what's his name? Gideon? Yeah, Gideon is our main guy, Beth is our main female, and then there's Teddy, who is the main villain of the story. You follow his timeline, you follow her timeline, and you follow Gideon's timeline. It's a lot of timelines to go through. But it was a really good book. It was a very long book, which was funny because the audiobook was really, really long. But when I saw the book in the store, it didn't look like that big. So I was confused, but I did enjoy it. I gave it 4-star? 3-star. I gave it 3.5. Probably just because it was very confusing at first, but I did enjoy it, and it did fulfill the horror bingo requirement. So that was another one off my list, so I was very happy about that. And it was just a luck of the draw. It just showed up and I was like, yeah, I'll listen to it. It had a cool cover. I liked it. So it was an interesting story. If you can follow the multiple timelines, you would definitely like this. It was a very interesting take on sleep and nightmares and how we perceive them. I did quite enjoy it. And that's all I read for October. So we're gonna jump right into November now. And in November, the first book I read was also for my horror bingo list. I'm just cruising on through. Was No One Gets Out Alive by Adam Neville. And this one was for book to big screen, so as seen on the big screen. And for horror mode, you had to not have read the book or seen the show or movie that it got turned into. And this happened to be turned into a show on Netflix, and I have not seen it. So it's like, that's perfect. So I might not actually watch the show. Maybe I might do a book to show comparison. I knew nothing about this book actually. I saw the show probably on Netflix, but I guess it didn't appeal to me because it's not even on my to watch list. But I gave this one, what did I give this one? 3 stars? 3 stars. And here's my issue with it. It is a classic haunted house book. You follow your main character, Stephanie, who is in poverty, and she's down and out, and she's just left her boyfriend. She's in a new town. She can't go back home. Her father has died. Her stepmother is awful and kicked her out. And so she's on her own, and she's young, and she doesn't really have a good job, and she needs a place to stay. So she finds a really cheap room for rent in a really rundown apartment, but it's in her price range. She can work while she's there. She thinks it's gonna be fine. The guy, his name is Knacker, and he's kind of a creep. He kind of creeps her out. She doesn't really know how she feels, and she tries to leave. The whole book is her trying to get out of the situation, but can't figuring it out because she has no money to get out of the situation. So it's a very interesting take on poverty and how you feel trapped when you can't get out. The book takes place, I want to say, over 4 days, 5 days. Hold on. Where's my last day? Day 9. 9 days. Okay? And it's a very long book. It is over 600 pages in this book. And truthfully, the book could have ended, where are you? This half did not need to be in here. This half, solid. Loved every second of it. Was totally engrossed, totally excited to read it. It just blew my mind. I loved the characters. I was totally engrossed. Wished her the very best. The haunted element was very cool. It gave enough backstory without being overdrawn. The 2 horrible characters, Knacker and his cousin, were just evil enough that you really wanted the best for her. It was sad enough that you wanted her to get out, but you understood why she couldn't, and it was heartbreaking, and you felt bad, and you understood, and you were rooting for her. And then second half happens, and I had to force myself to get through. It did not need to be there. It didn't add anything to the story. It didn't change how I felt about anything, and I thought it was unnecessary. I think if the show only does the first half, maybe it'd be a good show, but I feel like the last, I want to say like 200 pages did not need to be in this book, and it dragged after that. So if you get to the second half of the book, honestly, you could probably stop there. For anybody that did love it and thought it was beneficial to the story, I'm happy for you. I just didn't get. I thought it was repetitive and unnecessary. Take it as you will. The second book I read was The Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates, and this is my first Darcy Coates book, and that's my air freshener, by the way, if you heard that, and I gave that 4 stars, and it probably should have read it in December. It's a very winter heavy driven book, and I probably should have saved it, but I thought it was pretty good. Still, I liked it. It's more of a thriller than I would say horror. So you follow our main character. You don't really ever learn her name except for in passing when other characters mention it. Her name's Krista, but I don't think we learn that until like maybe a couple of chapters in, because it's through her point of view, so we don't really get to know it. But we follow Krista, and she and her boyfriend are up on a retreat in the mountains during the winter. Just a fun little getaway. You're gonna stay in this really fancy lodge. It's gonna be this just like resort type of retreat, and there's other couples there, other parents with their kids bonding, there's couples reconnecting, there's a bunch of people. And the first day up to the resort, the bus gets stuck and they have to dig out, and Krista and her boyfriend go off to look at the scenery, and she thinks he's gonna propose, and it's very cute, and she's all excited, and then a blizzard hits and they're trapped, and they soon learn that somebody is out there killing them, and it's a very claustrophobic feel. They're stuck in this cabin, they can't get out, they have no power, you know, there's somebody killing them out there, and like killing them like intensely, like decapitating, hanging their head in a tree type of kill. It's a very intense situation, and they're trying to figure out who, and there's only like a handful of them, so they think it's one of them. They know it's one of them. Cats, man, what are you gonna do? And so they turn on each other but don't turn on each other, and they're trying to get out, and they're trying to save each other, and they're very skeptical of each other. And you start learning about this twist that comes with it. Okay, where were we? They're in a cabin, nobody trusts each other. It's a very claustrophobic, tight, fast-paced thriller about, it's a whodunit kind of, and it's just, the ending I saw coming, but I didn't see coming. I suspected something of the sort, but the way it all ties together, I didn't see coming. I was like, oh, well, that's interesting, because the reason why they're all there comes together, and it's very unique, I should say. And I don't want to give anything away because it is a thriller, and if you talk too much about thrillers, you give everything away, and then what's the point? So we'll move on. But I did like it, and I will read more from Darcy Coates in the future. The third book I read was The Haunted Forest Tour. Why didn't I write down who wrote this one? It's by 2 different people. They'll be up here. I don't even have my Goodreads with me, so I can't even look it up. I don't have the book because I read it on my Kindle. But it'll be up here. So The Haunted Forest Tour, it actually would be good for 2 of the horror bingo requirements. If it's a good cryptid story, so you could add it to your cryptid reads, and it is a Halloween read because it all happens on Halloween. So if you're still looking, The Haunted Forest Tour is a good one to add to everything. And I gave this one 5 stars. Blew me away. I loved every second of it. And I know with this book, it's a very much, you either love it or you hate it. There is hardly any in between with this book. And I'm so glad that I was on the love it side, because I thought this book was everything. It was so much fun. So you follow this main character who goes on the Haunted Forest tour on Halloween, which is a special edition Haunted Forest tour. The Haunted Forest tour came around because a forest grew out of nowhere in the middle of New Mexico, I want to say, and it just sprung out of the ground in like 24 hours, and nobody could understand it. It killed a bunch of people, and now there's monsters that live inside this forest. They don't leave the forest ever, but they're all inside of it, so you can't go in it. And so they started adding like a tour around the forest, but for Halloween, you get to go inside the forest in their impenetrable tank trams. And surprise, surprise, they're not impenetrable. And it's about this group of people from the tram that are trying to survive within the forest. It all takes place within 24 hours. It's a very dark, graphic, bloody, gory time. And if you like that kind of stuff, you will like this book. It is such a unique read when you read about the characters and the cryptids that are in there. Some of them, their descriptions are like, oh my god, I want to see that on the big screen. I wish they would make a movie out of this. I would love to see them, like legit, just see them. And there's a very interesting take on how the forest grew. They do explain that, and I did enjoy that because I felt like it didn't need to be explained, because it's just a creepy, ooh, a forest grew. But the reason why is in there, and it was a very, I didn't see that coming. I was like, oh, okay, all right. And that, I have mixed feelings about that, because I didn't know if, I still don't know if it needed to go that route. But now it doesn't matter. It was a very, very fun read, a great time. I loved every second of it, and I'm so glad it got recommended via the horror group that I follow, because the cover looked really cool, and I was like, I have to read it. And it was on my Amazon Prime as a book that I could read, so I was like, oh, perfect. And I read it, and to understand the brilliance of it and the gory, fantastic time that it is, you really do just need to read it. Perfection. I would love to read more of these guys' stuff, because I think it is a blast. And if the rest of the books are like this, I know I'm gonna be a fangirl. So I can't wait for more. I already have them on my TBR. The 4th book I read, it really wasn't a book, it was a short story. I read The Pram by Joe Hill. And it was a very, very short, it was 50-ish pages. And it's a story about grief. You follow your main character, who, his wife is pregnant, and then she lost the baby, and they move out to this farmhouse to start over, essentially. And he goes to a country store and finds a pram, and he just becomes kind of overly attached to this pram and pushing an imaginary baby in it. And it's his way of dealing with the grief and the darkness that comes around, and it's a lot of cult vibes inside, and some pretty gnarly stuff happens within the 50 pages of it. It was a really good short story. I'm not gonna rate it because it's a short story, so I didn't give it any stars or anything like that. But it was an interesting take on like religion and cults and grief. For 50 pages, man, it packed a lot, and it was pretty good. And it was the first Joe Hill story that I've ever read, and he definitely takes after his dad, so well done. And the last book, speaking of cults, that I read was Last Days by Brian Everson. And this is what did I give this? 3 stars? 3 stars. I don't even remember. But you follow your main character. What is his name? Why can't I think? Why? I remember. I'm not good with people's names. My goodness. What is this? Lord Klein? Is his name Klein? Yes, Klein. You follow Klein, who was a detective of sorts, and he ended up having to cut off his own hand to solve the case and get the killer. And then this cult finds him, this cult of mutilates, and they believe that cutting off your body and becoming an amputee will bring you closer to God. And the more you cut off, the closer you are and the higher you are in the cult rank. So they have like 1s, and I believe the highest goes up to a 12 is the highest rank in here, which means that they have cut off 12 body parts. Fingers all count as 1, your hand counts as 1, your arm, your leg, your toes all count as like 1 individual one. And so these cultists really want Klein. There has been a troubling situation within their cult, and they need him to come solve the case, and they trust him because he is also an amputee and he self-cauterized the wound. So they trust him, they want him, and he gets brought in against his will to help solve the case, and it quickly turns on its head, and he struggles to get out, and he uncovers some things about the cult that he then has to fight against, and he needs to just not be dealing with them anymore, but they will not let him leave. So it's his struggle to get back to his own life. And I loved the writing in this. I laughed so much in the first section of this book. It's not very long, but I laughed so much at the way that the cultists talk. I don't know if it's supposed to be funny, but I thought it was hilarious. They like refer to each other. They'll be like, Klein will be like, why do you need me? And then they'll turn to each other and they'll be like, he wants to know why we need him. And then they'll be like, I understand. It's so funny. It's so worth the read just to listen to the way they talk. The amputations are pretty graphic, I will say that. But for a cult read, and I don't read many cult stories, but for some reason a mutilation cult that cuts off their own limbs just seemed like one I could jump into. And I was right. It was very, I feel like, crime heavy, so if you like crime thrillers and you like crime mysteries, you would probably really like this book. For graphic, gory fans too, you would like this book. I wouldn't say it's incredibly graphic. It's not like extreme horror or anything. It's like in the middle. It's not nothing, but it's not extreme either. So it's like right in the middle of it. But I definitely enjoyed it, and I thought it was hilarious. And I don't think it was meant to be hilarious, but I found it so funny. And I don't know what that says about me. Probably not anything good that I would think a cult is funny. Maybe it means I'd survive one. I don't know. Who knows? But that's all I've read in the last 2 months. So, what's that? 12 books in total? It's not many. I could do better. December, we're hoping to do much better. And December, I plan to read a lot of my Christmas-themed or winter-themed horror. So we shall see where that shakes up, and hopefully I will have a different hair color by then, and hopefully my animals will behave at that time. Who knows? But anyway, that's all I have for right now. That's all I read, and I will see you next month for another wrap-up. Until then, keep reading, keep suggesting what I should read, send me all your horror gold, and I'll see you next time.